pandemic. So we're really excited about that. It will be from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. We'll have a catered lunch, and it will be at the Baha'i International Community offices. For those who don't know, that's pretty much right across the street from the UN. So we hope that you all can join us there. This is also an election year for the committee. So anyone who has an interest in having a role on the committee's bureau, please do reach out to us and let us know. I think typically most of the bureau members tend to stay on for a few terms, and so we are not sure yet if we will have open positions, but knowing other people's interest in joining the bureau is always good. Even if there isn't a specific position open, we can typically find a role for you to help out in some capacity. The second announcement is that we will be hosting another event in New York, probably also at the Baha'i Community Center, if not at the United Nations itself, on or around October 25th. And that is because our new UN Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Religion or Belief, Naz, who many of you know, she will be delivering Dr. Shahid's report to the United Nations on that day. So when one special rapporteur is outgoing and the other is incoming, the incoming delivers the report of the outgoing. So she will be there, and we would love to, we will be having a meeting with her. We're just finalizing the logistics now. And then the third and final announcement is that we will be sending out an email in the coming days. It will likely come from our treasurer, John Amons, with regard to dues for the committee. So if you have not already paid your 2022 dues, which most of us have not, John will be following up with you. And we now have a nice online system for dues collections. It's called Cheddar Up. It's a great system. And you'll be receiving a link to that. So I will move now on to our program for today. We have 3 excellent speakers. I know 2 of them are on. I'm just scrolling through here to see if the third has joined yet. I don't believe she has, but I'm sure she will soon. We have Bonnie Dugal, who is also a part of this committee. We have Tong Nguyen from BPSOS, and we have one of the individuals who works with Dr. Tong, Luen Nguyen, as well. And so before we turn to the International Day, which will be our main focus today of the event, we've asked Bonnie to just provide us with some updates from the 2 major international religious freedom conferences that took place this summer. And so the first of those conferences was the IRF Summit that took place in Washington, D.C., and then subsequently the IRF Ministerial, which took place in London. And before I do turn it over to Bonnie, I wanted to briefly explain why we have these 2 separate conferences. I know it can be a bit confusing, and we've received many questions from people in the committee as to what's the difference between them. They seem to be sort of running parallel to each other. And so I thought I'd provide a very brief history, and that brief history is that starting in 2018, after Sam Brownback became the U.S. IRF ambassador, he launched the first ever ministerial here in Washington, D.C., really as a way to bring together many countries on this issue, so that, traditionally it's been seen as a U.S.-led initiative to advance religious freedom internationally. And of course, more and more countries over the years have been doing great work on this issue. And he wanted to just sort of officially bring together a coalition of the countries that were working together on this. And actually, I think over 82 countries attended that first ministerial. And so the US government hosted the second annual in 2019, and about 100 countries attended in 2019. And there were, of course, not only government components, there were civil society components as well. But I think at that time, there was a lot of uncertainty as to what would happen in the 2020 election. And I think there was a sense that those who were involved in these ministerials and this movement and bringing together so many countries didn't want there to be a loss of momentum if the government were to change and they weren't to carry on these ministerials. And so the idea was they would sort of, get other countries to commit to hosting these meetings as well, so that it's not just a US led initiative, but rather a truly multilateral global initiative. And so they got several countries to line up for the next hosting roles: Poland, Brazil, the UK. So in 2020, Poland hosted the ministerial, but it was purely virtual. I don't think it turned out as well as people would have hoped it would. And then in 2021, Brazil was supposed to host, and they pulled out last minute because of COVID and other issues. And so when that became clear in 2021, Ambassador Brownback, I think, decided, well, we really don't want to lose this momentum, that we need to have some sort of event. And so that's why he created the Earth Summit, which is more of a civil society based conference that went so well, they decided to do it again this year. Even though the UK had already agreed to host the ministerial, they decided to do both as sort of separate tracks. And so that's why we have both of them. They both have government components and civil society components, but the ministerial really is aimed at bringing governments together at the highest level rather than just having a few come in as in speaker roles. And the summit is much more geared toward, the grassroots and bringing civil society leaders together. So just in a nutshell, that's why we have these two separate components. I believe Bonnie is with us. Mac, you can help me identify her here, though.
We have one iPhone
Okay.
unlisted.
Bonnie, might that be you on the iPhone? If not, one of us could reach out to her, and we can certainly switch gears if we need to.
Kelsey, they're finishing up the other meeting now.
Oh, is it still going?
Yeah, it's finishing up right now. I just came from there, so overran. Very interesting.
No worries. Yeah, I didn't know it had run over because I left early. So
there she is.
That's perfectly fine. Okay, Bonnie, just in time. We were just handing things over to you. I know your other event just finished up. So if you'd prefer us to start with Vietnam, we can do that. Otherwise, we can jump into just an overview of the conference and the summit. It's completely up to you.
Can you give me just 2 minutes, because I've gone from event to event.
Yes, no problem whatsoever. I'm happy actually to just turn to the International Day first, and we can start with that and then come back to the ministerial and the summit. Just keep in mind the brief history that we just talked about for when we get there. So turning back to this International Day, it was first introduced in the General Assembly in 2019. There was really nothing else like it. So I know several of you just came from another event on this day, and we're really thrilled that there is so much activity going on around this day, because as some backstory, I was actually involved in the negotiations for the resolution that created this day. And one difficulty that came up during these negotiations was choosing what calendar day would be, the annual marker for this. And there were some days that were proposed based on perhaps an event that happened that affected one or more religious communities. And then ultimately, it was decided that the day that would be chosen should not be significant to one group and not others. And so they chose August 22nd because it sort of fit that bill, and no other international day was on this date. But one of the problems with this date is that the UN is not in session. And so this is a somewhat difficult time to garner a lot of advocacy around a topic when no one's really at the UN right now. Actually, most of the diplomats and UN Secretariat are on holiday during this time. So we're just really grateful that there were so many events, that the Earth Roundtable put on such a great event, that our colleagues and friends in the UK did the same. And that's why we're always trying to commemorate this day with an event as well. The UN has a little blurb actually on their website that, international days are actually very important. Of course, they predate the establishment of the United Nations, but the United Nations has always embraced them and created them because they are powerful tools. Number one, to educate the public on an issue. Number two, to mobilize action and resources. And number three, what they call to celebrate achievement. And in this case, achievement would really look like the reduction of violence and persecution against religious minorities. So today we will be turning primarily to Vietnam. and the violence that we've seen there against religious minorities. And not only that, but I believe it was mentioned perhaps in the note that went out with the invitation, but Vietnam is one of the few, if not only, governments that actually takes issue with this International Day and tries to shut down any recognition of it. And so we thought we'd hear from two experts on persecution of religious minorities in Vietnam who can shed some light on some recent developments there. So I'll turn to our speakers. We're going to start with Dr. Tong Nguyen. I'll introduce him first, and then I'll hand it over to him. He is having some connection problems, but he is with us at least by phone, if the video is not working. A refugee from Vietnam in 1988, Dr. Nguyen joined Boat People SOS as a volunteer. And in 2001, he became the full-time executive director. Under his leadership, BPSOS has rescued or assisted in the rescue of 11,000 victims of human trafficking in 26 countries, and they have successfully advocated for 20,000 repatriated Vietnamese boat people to be resettled to the United States. In 2015, Dr. Tong co-launched the Southeast Asia Freedom of Religion or Belief, also known as CFORB initiative. He currently serves on the steering committee of the International Religious Freedom Summit and on the Council of Experts of the International Religious Freedom or Belief Alliance. So Dr. Tong, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Kelsey, and hello, everyone. I'm sorry that I cannot join you with my camera because of the very somewhat weak signal here at the location where I am. I will start to say that today's web are very much appropriate and opportune with regard to Vietnam. And I'm going to present two topics that should be unrelated. But thanks to the recent actions by the Vietnamese government, they are now intimately connected. The first topic involves the hindrance by the government authorities of against their citizens' observance of the International Day, commemorating victims of acts of violence based on religion or belief. And the second topic is a set of legal challenges that ADF International and Boat People SOS have been working together for the past 2 years to support. These legal challenges try to force the hands of the Vietnamese government to come out to publicly and officially admit that groups that come together to pray, to practice their faith without forming an organization are not required, again, not required to register with the government. So those two topics are now interrelated. So let me present the first topic first, and that is the hindrance, efforts by the Vietnamese government to hinder the observance of this special International Day. So Vietnam not only targets the different independent religious communities, churches, we call them independent because they don't submit themselves to the control by the government. So the government use violence, harassment, even torture, imprisonment to force them to either abandon the faith or join government-controlled organizations. And not only that, since 2019, the government authorities at different levels have worked very adamantly to block citizens from observing this International Day, which is August 22nd. Nevertheless, despite all those acts of intimidation and violence and threats and harassment, this year, 52 groups have registered with us. notified us that they would hold observance activities for this day. And actually, so far, most of them have only held those commemorating activities last week or this last weekend. Those include 23 Montagnard Christian house churches, 9 Catholic congregations. I'd like to add one more that just held the activities without notifying us, 20 Khao Dai communities, and 1 Buddhist community. Since 2019, from the very first observance of this special day, we have documented numerous cases of government interference with citizens marking this day. Basically, the citizens were told that doing so, that is, observing this day, violated Vietnam's law, or was tantamount to denouncing the government for violations of human rights, and especially the right to religious freedom, which is actually the case, because the government of Vietnam really committed violence and harassment against its citizens for the faith. Let me give a few examples here. Just 5 days after August 22nd into 2020, a Khao Dai dignitary, Mr. Trần Văn Bé, in Tiền Giang province, he was abducted in the street. And not only that, his son, his college-age son, was abducted from his workplace. And both father and son were held for interrogation and threats at the police station for 10 to 12 hours. And they were ordered to stop, to desist from ever observing that day. Another example is the Buddhist Trần Văn Thường in Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu province. On September 10th of 2020, he too became victim of the government because his family held an observance of the International Day. In the dead of the night, his son, working as a guard at a resort, a tourist place, was abducted by the police and taken to the police station. And by dawn, Mr. Thuong learned about his disappearance, his son's disappearance. So his entire family came to the police station, and many of them got arrested. And they became victims of violence at the police station. And again, they were told not to observe the International Day in the future. And the last example involves Mr. Ething Nguyen, a house church leader. He's a Montagnard Christian in Chư Mờ Ga, Đắk Lắk province. Last year, on February 26th, he was taken to the police station, interrogated, and told not to observe International Day. And that was done late because he did the observance 6 months earlier. However, the government of Vietnam, the authorities were very clever. They never left a trace of the harassment and the hindrance. For example, the threats were made verbally. There was no report of the interrogation sessions in writing ever. The invitations, they call them invitations, but actually those are summons to the police station, were given out and they're taken back by the police officers. So there was no evidence of their harassment, of their non-compliance with their commitments to the UN. But surprisingly, on June 10th of this year, the chairman of the People's Committee of Chư Mờ Ga district in Đắk Lắk province issued decisions in writing to find 3 Montagnard Christian leaders, including Mr. Ething Nguyen I just mentioned. And they belong to 2 local house churches. Each was fined 4 million Vietnam dong, which is equivalent to 170 US dollars. That's a quite hefty sum, equivalent to about 3 months of family income for these people in their areas. And they were fined because they had observed August 22nd, International Day in 2021, and that was about 10 months earlier, for observing December 10th, International Human Rights Day in 2021, and for participating in group religious practice at a private home without prior government approval. For the first time ever, we had in writing evidence of the Vietnamese government not only hindering its citizens from observing this International Day, but also penalizing them for doing so. We believe that the new UN Special Rapporteur on freedom of religion or belief just sent a communication to the Vietnamese government expressing concern over these incidents. Today, just earlier today, the new U.S. Human Rights Officer at the Consulate General in Saigon met with 7 representatives of religious communities in Vietnam, and 6 of them had been harassed and threatened because of the observance of the International Day. And we, both people as well, in order to track the response of the Vietnamese government for this year, we have deployed our team of local rapporteurs to monitor each community that has registered with us and report any incidents. Unfortunately, sadly, there are already one major incident on August 20th, that is 2 days ago. In Long Xuyên City, An Giang Province, the police from the provincial police department came to the house of Khao Dai members who were not celebrating, who were not conducting the observance. They were just conducting religious activities. And they were told, they were forced to sign a statement pledging not to observe August 22nd International Day this year. After resisting for 8 hours, they finally gave up and signed the pledge. Now, let me mention about and talk about very briefly about the second topic, and that is the legal challenges that ADF International and both SOS have been working together to kind of force the hands of the government of Vietnam to come out in public and officially and in writing, admitting that groups like the Khao Dai group like I just mentioned, or the Montagnard Christian house churches don't need to register their religious activities or to get pre-approval from the government. And how are the two topics related? Analysis. We had a team of legal experts poring over the law on belief and religion of Vietnam that became effective January 2018. It was designed to impose government controls on different groups, independent groups, and those independent groups, they don't want to register with the Vietnamese government because they don't want to be controlled by the government. But our legal team found out that the law does not require such groups to register their religious activities unless they plan to form a religious organization. Meaning, a group of individuals merely coming together for prayer service at someone's home does not need to register with or even to notify the government. However, local authorities don't interpret the law that way. They insist that pre-approval is required. And pre-approval is unlikely for groups that are not subservient to the government. So for the past 2 years, ADF International and BPSOS have collaboratively supported 9 Montagnard Christian communities in the Central Highlands in their legal challenges. And what does it mean? It means that with the support of our team of legal experts, Montagnard house churches would notify local authorities of their religious activities, thus challenging those authorities to respond in writing. And if there's no response, or if the response is not satisfactory, these groups would escalate the challenge to increasingly higher authorities until it reaches the central government in Hanoi. And this will be followed with administrative complaints, and if necessary, with litigation against individual government officials at all levels for wrongly denying citizens of their right to worship. Escalation to the central government also provides the basis for the international community, including the Department of State, the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, or USERF, diplomatic missions in Vietnam, and UN mandate holders to compel the Vietnamese government to comply with its commitments to international human rights standards. Now the government in Hanoi can no longer find excuse that they were not aware of what happened at the local level. Now, interestingly enough, in lieu of responding as required by law, the government of Chư Mga district in Đắk Lắk province, as I just mentioned, slapped administrative fines against 3 individuals belonging to 2 house churches. And these 2 house churches were exactly those that already recently notified the government of their religious activities. So I believe that this is the diversion tactic and scare tactic to discourage these 2 house churches from pursuing their legal challenges. Confident that they are on the right side, these 3 victims, again this year, just last weekend, held activities to commemorate victims of violence. So because they themselves, the community themselves, were victims of violence. So it's very much justified for them to continue to do that. But for the safety of these brave house church leaders, we are calling on the international community to please closely monitor their safety, their situation, their conditions, and all developments in those communities for the past few weeks. And we will continue, we both people as well, will continue to monitor the situation for the next few months. And with that, again, I'd like to thank the UN NGO committee on FORP for hosting this webinar, which is very timely and appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tong. So much information there, and I'm sure a lot of us have questions. We'll hold questions for the end, just so that we ensure we get through the other 2 presentations. It's my privilege now to turn it over to one of your partners, one of the volunteers for BPSOS, Loan Nguyen. Miss Loan Nguyen left Vietnam herself in 1971 and attended university in Belgium, and then completed her studies at the University of Bordeaux in France, where she graduated with a master's degree in child psychology in 1975. But the fall of Saigon on April 30th of that year ended her dreams of returning to Vietnam to be a child psychologist for an association of Catholic schools in Saigon. For those who aren't aware, Saigon is now known as Ho Chi Minh City. She decided to travel around the world, teaching religion, English, French, including in Iran and Egypt. She has been involved in many youth organizations and spent years overseeing youth volunteers at the Sanctuary of Lourdes in France. In 1990, she met her husband, who was a Catholic refugee from Iraq, and they moved to the United States. With her family, she has been an active member of the American Catholic and Chaldean Catholic parishes. And through her partnership with BPSOS, she and a group of volunteers in 2018 started a program to teach English to Vietnamese students who are located in Vietnam, Thailand, and many other countries. So I will turn it over to you now.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share with you the current situation of the Catholic communities in Vietnam. Today, we commemorate the victims of acts of violence based on religion and or belief. And Vietnam Catholic Church is suffering of violence as other religions in Vietnam, like Dr. Thanh just talked to us. Today, I will just present you the situation of the Catholics, then the response of the Catholics in Vietnam and outside of Vietnam, and finally the actions, because we don't want only to talk, we want also to move, to do something in and outside of Vietnam. First, the current situation of the Catholic Church. Yusuf recommended for many years, Vietnam has to be the top 10 countries in the world on the list of the countries of particular concern. In fact, the Catholic Church is a target of persecution from an atheist government. Communist in ideology and action. In Vietnam, there are about 97 million people, 7 million of them are Catholics. That means we are only 7% and we are minority. The Vietnamese government enforces in 2018 the laws on belief and religion, but systematically violate religious freedom. They use strategies that succeed in dispersing and creating panic among the Catholic faithful. I will discuss 3 ways in which the government has done this. First, murders, imprisonment of religious leaders, then grabbing lands, strategies to take properties of Catholic communities, and finally, severe punishment of RPOC, religious prisoners of conscience. The first way the Vietnamese government attacked the Catholics. In recent years, an increased number of priests, religious and lay people have been attacked violently. Police attacks on individuals incite hatred and violence that lead to physical assault, stabbing, and murders. From 2008 to 2022, we recorded more than 14 cases of attack against priests religious from north to south of Vietnam. This year, in January 2022, Father Nguyễn Ngọc Thanh was hearing confession in his church in Compton when he was killed by a man with a knife. There was no trial due to mental health of the attacker, according to the government. In fact, Father Thanh was harassed already many times by local police. The second way the government attacked the Catholics. Since 1954 until now, over 10,000 plots of lands, churches, and buildings belonging to Catholic communities have been confiscated, destroyed, and damaged without counting on private religious schools and Catholic hospitals. Example, the Nunciature in Hanoi, confiscated from 1954, it became a park, and until now, no negotiation. In 2018, in Thiên An Monastery in Huế, in the center of Vietnam, the big cross in the land was damaged by the mob and the police, following by physical assaults to the monks. They still harassed the monks and grabbed the land. In 2016, the $11 billion Formosa Steel Company spilled the toxic waste over about 200 kilometers or 125 miles of coastline in the center of Vietnam. More than 270,000 people lost their job of fishing, according to Amnesty International. The inhabitants of the region protested, and the government created the Red Flag Association to undermine violently the legal fight of the fishermen. The third way the Vietnamese government attacked the Catholics. It's not new that the Catholic defenders of human rights have been put on trial for exercising their freedom of speech and the freedom of religion. But recently, the punishment they have been subject to is far more severe than the supposed crime. For example, Nguyễn Văn Hóa, he is a Vietnamese Catholic blogger from Hà Tĩnh province. He was arrested in 2017. He was only 22 years old and charged for abusing democratic freedoms under Article 258 of the Vietnamese Penal Code. 7 years in jail, and he is still in jail. You can check all this information in typing just their name in website. Now I will present you the response of the Catholics in and outside of Vietnam. In Vietnam, the news about the murder of Father Tan was immediately shared on media channels like Facebook, YouTube, and thanks to the development of the new technology, network, website, smartphone, we can watch right away the protest of all acts of persecution. And we had also a small group of young people who wanted to learn English, to learn Vietnamese laws and their rights with the help of Vietnamese overseas like PPSOS. They are also learning how to prepare reports to share with the international communities. So whatever Dr. Thắng just said to you, that is the work of the reports. Outside of Vietnam, many religious orders like the Jesuit, Dominicans, Redemptorists sent news about the persecution to their communities around the world. For example, Vatican News or French La Croix newspaper or website. Also, different organizations watched, reported, and involved in their local government in attack. For the attacks of the Vietnamese Catholic, example, Human Rights Watch, Radio Free Asia, Amnesty International, and many others. Here in the US, PPSOS work closely with the Congress and other NGOs to report violations against the human rights in Vietnam. Finally, here is the plan of action for Catholics in and outside of Vietnam. In Vietnam, the young people need to continue their formation in reporting violence and awareness of the right of citizens and the law of the country. We have to create more partnering teams, more networks to work together like Catholic between Catholics and Catholic with other religions. In keeping with the tradition of the Catholic Church to help the most in need, the local communities need to develop and be able to maintain their institutions like daycares, schools, hospitals, orphanages, senior centers in avoiding the grabbing of the government. Outside of Vietnam, we have a lot to do. The last summit in June of the Earth was a big event for us. Joseph is a voice to the Vietnamese government about the persecuted people in Vietnam. More actions can be done. For example, the CFOP in Bali in November. In addition, as a Catholic, we recommend the following: strengthen local Catholic groups by funding their actions and giving them the fund, the tools to report any violation of the human rights. We have to develop more partnering teams. For example, our group of advocates for faith and justice in Vietnam, EFGV, was created in February this year after the murder of Father Tan. We work together with many groups, ONG, NGO to defend the religious group in Vietnam. We have to develop also more group with the young people. We have the next gen created by PPSOS for the future generation. We work closely with US Congress and NGO to reclaim also the lands, the properties confiscated in recent years. We have many cases. Finally, we work towards the release of the Catholic advocates of religious freedom and freedom of speech who are in jail unjustly, like Nguyễn Văn Hóa and many others. So you can contact the PPSOS and know our actions. And my last thought, the government of Vietnam says Vietnam is developed in economy and in tourism. But don't forget, Vietnam is still communist. Thank you for sharing and listening with me today. Thank you, Kenzie.
Thank you so much for that. You can feel free to share your and Dr. Tong's information in the chat if anyone does want to reach out regarding Vietnam. Bonnie, we're going to turn it over to you now. Bonnie Dugal, many of us know her on this call already, but she is the principal representative of the Baha'i International Community to the United Nations, and she's co-president of Religions for Peace. She seems to be president or chair of more committees at the United Nations than I can even count. I actually had listed them out preparing her bio, and it was just so many. Just know she is so involved on anything that has to do with FORB at the UN, on anything that intersects with religious freedom and women's rights issues. She's really been an integral part of this committee in, first of all, creating the committee and then serving as president in other roles. And now she's still a member of our committee ex officio. So Bonnie, we're delighted to have you with us here. We know you've been pulled in a lot of directions today in a lot of meetings and events, but we value your insight. And so turning a little bit away from Vietnam and turning a bit away from the International Day, although it's all related, is these two big conferences that took place this summer. And Bonnie, before you joined, I gave a bit of the overview historically of why we have these two separate conferences. So don't feel the need to go into that. But basically, we just want people who are interested and involved to know that these two things exist and to know that they're avenues for advocacy. It used to be that if we wanted to get an item in front of a government, we had to go one government at a time because they weren't really working together on religious freedom at the United Nations. And now we have this alliance, and so you can get something to 30 plus countries kind of right away. And so between that and the summit, we just thought it would be really great to hear some highlights from this year's conference and steps moving forward over the next year, what you know, what you can share with us as you and I attended both of these conferences this summer. So over to you.
Thank you so much, Kelsey. I have been doing this work for such a long time, so it may seem impressive, but spread over 20 some years, more than 25 years now. It's just a day in anybody else's work day, I guess. I am going to go chronologically, and Kelsey was present at both occasions, and she's got a younger, much sharper brain than I. So if I leave anything out, Kelsey, you're going to fill in. So I take comfort in that. The first was the International Religious Freedom Summit, which is now a civil society summit, but led by the former Senator and Ambassador Sam Brownback and Katrina Lantos Sweat. Both of them are extremely committed to this issue, and they've been partnering with some pretty heavyweight organizations that are working on international religious freedom, including Kelsey's law firm and others. So much of the focus of the conversations were, to my mind, drawn from the topics were drawn from some of the campaigns that were launched the previous year, such as ending blasphemy and apostrophe laws, combating anti-Semitism, preventing and responding to genocide, the issue of women and international religious freedom, the issues related to international religious freedom in China. There was there were some wonderful. There was a panel, with the USERF commissioners. That's the United States Commission for International Religious Freedom, and that's a bipartisan commission that was established in the 1990s, and several of the commissioners were there, and they spoke. There were panels with victims of the victims of abuse based on freedom of or lack thereof, lack of freedom of religion or belief. And then there were a number of lunch and dinner events, which I again found very helpful because the host organizations showcased some of their projects. So it was really good to see what several organizations are doing to promote and protect freedom of religion or belief around the world. And then there were a number of breakout sessions on a whole host of issues. As Kelsey mentioned, this was a great opportunity to network and advocate about any issues that are of concern to us. However, I also found it to be a tremendous learning exercise because even for those who've been doing this work a long time, there's always more to learn. There's always more to learn from the strategies others are using, some successes, some tries which are still hopefully going to yield some success, and also sadly a number of new violations that perhaps I hadn't heard of before. So it was a very worthwhile experience for those of you who haven't attended one, and I would recommend attending in the future. I am hearing that it might be in the US or it might be some elsewhere, so stay tuned for more information. I'll move on then. We went on to the ministerial in London. Now the ministerial is what this meeting in DC used to be, and I understand from Kelsey that she's explained that connection. So the ministerial now, this year, was held in London. The government of the United Kingdom hosted it, and it was on the 5th and 6th of July. Some of us were, Kelsey and I included, were invited the evening before to a reception at the House of Commons, which was also attended by several groups of victims from around the world that had been brought by the UK government. I guess it's individuals, human rights defenders and others that the UK government has been assisting. And following that, that day, the meeting, the ministerial started on the 5th and 6th. Of course, as all these meetings begin at the very start, of course, there was the opening session with speeches by Prince Charles, by the Archbishop of Canterbury, other religious leaders, and then the focus primarily of the ministerial was on 3 tracks, that of prevention, protection, and promotion. And there were parallel sessions in plenaries, well, they weren't plenaries, I guess they were breakouts, but parallel sessions. And then there were a number of plenary sessions as well. Again, I believe, Kelsey, also a member of the Council of Experts, right? So both of us serve on the Council of Experts to the International Religious Freedom and Belief Alliance, which is made up of 40-something member states of governments, and the alliance is predicated on the idea that more must be done to protect members of religious minority groups and to combat discrimination and persecution based on religion or belief. And so there were a number of events for the Council of Experts. We had the privilege of attending a reception and at Lancaster House, which is a wonderful heritage property owned by the US government. We also were invited for tea at number 10 Downing Street. There was a lunch with the steering committee of the IRFA and the Council of Experts. And then the US government held a reception. And then finally, the group of NGOs that are working on freedom of religion or belief in the UK held a day-long session on future strategies, etc., on the 7th of July, which was followed by a dinner at the Travelers Club. Now, some of the key areas that were identified at the ministerial to take forward from here on, strengthening legal systems. And the UK this morning as well at an event, Fiona Bruce, the special envoy, mentioned how the UK government is really going to fund the possibility for particular legal systems around the world that might be weak on FOR to be strengthened. And they are asking civil society that might have expertise to contribute to that effort. There's also one about working with young people to inspire a new generation of freedom of religion or belief champions, to make connections between the forgosphere, as they're calling it, and the wider human rights community. So those of us that have been working at the UN in New York, for instance, on freedom of religion or belief, we also sometimes engage with other actors in the human rights world in New York or Geneva. And how do we make the connection between freedom of religion, which is a very mainstream human right, however, sometimes it's given a backseat or a side seat, and the civil and political and cultural and economic rights seem to be a different animal in a sense. So the idea is to create these connections. Another proposal was to have a new network on cultural and religious heritage. Another one to develop for resources for children, to make better use of social media to share individual lived experiences, and to introduce FORB into the mainstream media. And then to set up a global network of freedom of religion or belief human rights defenders, and to set up a global network of freedom of religion or belief roundtables. Now, you've probably heard about this initiative, about these roundtables, and if you haven't, you will be, because the planning for that is underway. And there's already talk of one being held in Lebanon, another one in Qatar, some in Southeast Asia, and so all over the world, we will see these roundtables so that those that can't attend these summits and ministerials will be able to engage at local and regional levels. And then there's also, there was some possible plans to champion the cases of prisoners of conscience. Other efforts that came up were possibility of engaging with non-like-minded countries. There are a number of countries that are members of IRFPA and are committed to issues of freedom of religion or belief. And then there are others who, while freedom of religion or belief may be mainstream in their country, but it's not a priority for their government. Or then there are those that could be violating freedom of religion and therefore are not like-minded. So the idea was to begin to engage with the non-like-minded and bring them on board as well and emphasize the importance of freedom of religion. There's also one of the possible initiatives coming out of this would be to support the development of reliable data and monitoring of FOB violations and early warning systems. And then the use and misuse of technology for freedom of religion. A relationship with humanitarian and SDGs, because again, FOB and humanitarian aid and SDGs in Goal 16, I believe there would be linkages. There was some suggestions to improve religious literacy of diplomats and government officials, because not all of them understand the nuances of freedom of religion or belief, even if they understand the broader issues, which not all of them do. And then, again, to better network for concerned organizations and to encourage states to make permanent envoys, such as the US has Ambassador Rashad Hussain, and the UK has Fiona Bruce, and the Netherlands and Denmark and Norway and other countries also have these special envoys on freedom of religion. And the idea is to have more such envoys promoting FOB, both at home as well as abroad. I don't know if I've forgotten anything. I think I've spoken longer than the 10 minutes I was asked to speak. So
That was great, Bonnie. That was a really great overview. You covered it very thoroughly. I think one big takeaway from that is that the IRFPA, this alliance of roughly 40 countries, has no shortage of ambition. Those are a lot of initiatives that they have underway. They're trying to tackle this issue from every angle, which is really necessary. And so it's exciting to see all the different things. And I think it's a reminder for everyone on this call that there is something you can plug into, because all of you in some way work on at least one of those issues. I will flag the Prisoners of Conscience group because Dr. Tong and I will be helping to spearhead that. And so for everyone on this call, please send Prisoners of Conscience based on religious issues our way. We want representation from all religious groups. On the issue of representation, I did get some statistics back from the IRF Summit. They had over 40 separate faith groups present, and I didn't get statistics from the ministerial, but I believe it was the same. So one great thing we're seeing from both of these conferences is that they really have an incredible diversity of representation of religious groups around the world. And then the only other point I'll make is that next year, Brazil has agreed to host the ministerial. As I mentioned, they were not able to in 2021. And so at the very end of the ministerial in London, one of the Brazilian government officials stood up and said that they have received the green light to move forward with 2023. And I think there will be a large civil society component. So hopefully many of you will be able to attend that conference. So again, thank you, Bonnie. We will turn it over to you all now. Feel free to ask Dr. Tong, Loen, or Bonnie any questions you might have. Also feel free, as I mentioned in the email, to bring to our attention any new issues relevant to this International Day, issues of violence against religious minorities that we might not be aware of, or take the opportunity to commemorate a victim and honor them and what they've done. So I'm opening up the floor. I did see at least one or two hands up already. My arrow is covering the names here, so I'm going to have to reconfigure my screen. But Sufi, I believe you were first in terms of having a hand up.
Yeah.
So if you'd still like to speak, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Kelsey, I really appreciate, and this is wonderful. And I was noticed this when first time announced this August 22nd, and I'm very much involved against the violation the human rights, especially the religious related in Sindh region of Pakistan. Hindus are actually and blasphemy, the also the forced conversion of the Christian girls, and you must be aware about the Sri Lankan guy when was over there, how they killed him. And I am actually this upcoming General Assembly. During that time, I'm going to the hunger strike for 7 days from September 13th to September 20th. And the one of the top issue, which is my part of the hunger strike, is the religious extremism in the Sindh region of Pakistan. Even today, yesterday, is events happen. If you not much cover in the mainstream media, but you must be aware about it. I have just request humbly to Bani and Kelsey, you, what kind of help you guys can to do, means when I'm doing the hunger strike from September 13th, I will be empty stomach 7 days without any food, just with the water, no juice or anything. I really appreciate if you can help me in this regards. Thank you very much.
One thing we absolutely can do is send out information to the larger committee. So anything that you'd like us to share, please feel free to send to the email address that you use to register for this event, so we can get the word out about the initiatives that you're working on.
I will send it to you. Thank you.
Thanks so much. And then for others, feel free to just raise your hand using the little reactions raise hand feature. Or Daniel, just raise your physical hand. Those are always good too. So here, over to you.
And Bonnie, I'd really be interested in hearing your take on customary international law and international standards and the erosion of that. We had a wonderful presentation at the UN Forb by a lawyer who explained to us what customary international law is. And for those of you who aren't familiar, it's a lot of United Nations programs like UN Forb depend not on written codified treaties and laws, but we look at each other's nations and we say, okay, there is an international standard of how we all behave. And what nations like Iran do when they are abusing religious minorities is they say, well, look at, and I don't want to insult other countries, but they look at a long, long list of other countries that are discriminating against religious minorities. And it's so frustrating. And I'd like to hear you talk about how this has changed your advocacy with the government of Iran, if it has at all.
Sure. Thank you. That lawyer was Brian Leopard, I believe, and he's a professor of international law at the University of Nebraska. I remember that talk as well. In terms of Iran or any country for that matter, the defense every country normally takes is these are internal matters. We do not violate freedom of religion. These individuals, whomever they might be, are criminals. And in Iran's case, it could be insulting God, to spying, to creating, working against national security, whatever that means. And China and other countries that have their own explanations, whatever they might be. So the bigger issue is that all these countries have committed to uphold the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Most of them have signed on to the Bill of Human Rights, which includes the Universal Declaration, but also the international covenants on civil and political rights and economic, social, and cultural rights. So they have responsibilities to uphold the human rights of their citizens, including ethnic minorities or religious minorities. And it is a government's role. So even if the government is not perpetrating the violations, in some cases it could be civil and social unrest in a country. But it's the government's role to protect all of its citizens, let alone go after them. So yes, to shorten my answer, it's difficult when a state itself is perpetrating the violations to hold them responsible. It calls for the entire international community to rally and to speak out. And that's what's important. And for media to speak out. Somehow, freedom of religion or belief issues aren't if I may use the term, the sexy human rights again for the media, because they will cover political dissidents, they'll cover cases of imprisonments and police beatings, etc. But somehow Forbes is not one of those that get front page news on a regular basis. And also, if there's a particular violation going on, it's long and slow. So it's 2 people one day, 3 people the next day, and the media doesn't see, though we reported this last week, we're not going to report it next week. And so it is a big problem. However, it really, in some parts, in many parts of the world where this is taking place, it really, weakens the social fabric. So wherever there might be violation of freedom of religion or belief, you can imagine that society cannot be very strong and united. So I think it's in the interests of the governments to promote for.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Daniel. Bonnie, thank you for your answer. We've seen even when the media is covering Forbes situations, sometimes they don't do it in a Forbes lens. So last week there was a very well documented burning of a church in Egypt that did get a lot of attention from the New York Times and others, but it was all within the framework of perhaps there was some sort of building code violation, or perhaps this was some electrical issue. And since then, 4 other churches have caught on fire. And so we feel pretty confident that this was not some sort of mere electrical problem. And yet that side of the story has not been reported. The tragedy has, which is that many lives were lost, and we're glad that got publicity. But the Forbes angle really has been missing in large part. Arvind, dear, we're going to turn to you, and then I think we'll have time for at least one more hand after you.
Thank you so much. My question is for Bonnie and for you, that the organizations like Amnesty International, they also publish their reports and give it to the governments. And usually the response of the government is that, yes, this is our internal matter, and there's a very good system of checks and balances because we are a democratic nation. So, and it doesn't make too much headway then. And I think Bonnie also mentioned that one very important thing, that it's very important for everyone to speak against injustice to anyone, because it divides your community in the long term, the society in the long run.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. I'd love to hear from you as well, Bonnie. I mean, one thing that we're definitely seeing in cases that we work on around the world is that there's no shortage of different types of crimes that the government accuses religious minorities of. And sometimes they don't even present evidence of the crime. So in Turkey, we have religious minorities being deported from the country, being banned from entering the country, and they're told that they've been caught up in some sort of national security situation, but they don't present any evidence of what it is that they've done. And so these are highly difficult types of cases because you're disproving something that's never even been presented to you. And as Bonnie already mentioned, there are so many other types of crimes that governments can accuse religious groups of. And so, groups like BPSOS, I think, are doing a fantastic job of documenting what it is that people are being charged of, what the actual evidence is, and being able to share this very rigorous documentation with the international community. And what's also, I think, very helpful is sharing notes with many other religious groups. And so, we've been tracking, for instance, a situation in Algeria with Christians, but when we look at the Ahmadiyya, for instance, also in Algeria, experiencing similar things, we start seeing trends, and we start realizing this is not about one community violating building codes necessarily. This is about a crackdown on religious groups who don't conform with the majority religious positions. And so when we can all sort of work together with different groups, we can show that this is systematic, and it's not about small groups here who aren't conforming with the laws, but they're actually being attacked. Bonnie, I'm sure you have something to add to that.
You did a great job. We have similar issues in Qatar. It's a small community, and again, the same thing. Their work permits are denied, or if they reach a certain age, they say, now you've aged out and you have to leave. There's a whole pattern of means by which a government can begin to eliminate individuals of a particular group or another that they want. So.
Yeah, thank you. We are just at time now, everyone. Thank you again for joining us. I did flag in the beginning the very few announcements we had. I will just, for those of you who might have joined a little bit late, I will reiterate our general annual meeting will be in person in New York. Bonnie has graciously agreed to host us at the Baha'i International Community Center across the street from the UN. And this will be on October 12th from 1 to 3 with lunch. We will also have a virtual component. So if you can't join us in person, feel free to join virtually, and then save the date around October 25th. We don't know an exact, it could be the day before, it could be the day after, but when our new Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Religion or Belief, Dr. Nazila Ghanea, will be presenting the former Special Rapporteur's report. And then again, you will be receiving an email with regard to dues for the committee to be a member in good standing. So as soon as we get a little bit more information about the upcoming fall events, we'll be sending those out. We hope you can join us in person or virtually. We look forward to starting to gather again soon. So thank you again for joining. Thank you to all of our speakers, and we should you'll be hearing from us soon.